from the owner's perspective, whether it's building rockets or building cars or taking care of buildings or writing software or running buildings, whatever it is that they do, their core competency is not BIM. It's not necessarily reality capture. And so that's where we help them out, is that we can be that trusted advisor for that journey so that it's implemented the right way. Because even from our side of it, it's changing so rapidly, it's challenging to keep up with. And that's why we work so closely with industry partners to understand what things are on the horizon, what new things are you going to be releasing, how are those going to integrate, and are they interchangeable with other systems?
Welcome to the Reality Capture Network, where we focus on technology-driven innovation, education, and community. The Reality Capture Network, bringing the future to you. On this episode of the RCN Podcast, the technology consultant at Gafcon Digital, John Niles.
Finding that right balance of accuracy to speed is critical. To understand what's going on there, that deviation analysis to occur, you don't necessarily have to have sub-millimeter accuracy. We just want to know, are you putting the pipe in the right place?
Controlling things and what methods we collect data with and how we convert to models. It really is an exciting time in the technology.
We have that ability to now go back as a time capsule and look through time. So we can start to peel back the walls. I mean, it's just magical. There's a need to have that interoperability between systems, sharing that data and being able to push it from one system to the other.
Like you talked about, what's the process to get the data to somebody? It's shipping a hard drive still sometimes because it's so big, you don't want to wait and upload.
What are the data retention policies? Those are things that still need to be worked out, and we're still working through that as an industry, trying to better understand that and make sure that those deliverables are provided the right way. It's critical.
All right, welcome to the Reality Capture Network. Today we are excited to welcome John Niles with us. Thanks for joining, John.
Thank you so much, Matthew. It's really an honor to get a chance to speak with you.
Yeah, we're excited to talk with you. I know you have quite a history in the industry and you know, working along the side of reality capture and digital twins, and there's a lot of exciting things going on around now and that we're moving into toward the future. But as usual, you know, we really love the podcast to be a chance to dive into the story of each guest that's coming on. So before we get into what we're doing today and where things are going, let's go back into a little bit of your history and your story. I'd love to hear kind of your journey of, you know, what you did growing up and what inspired you, what got you into the industry, and take us along the journey a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the business for about 30 years. I started out in the Puget Sound Naval Shipyards out in Seattle as a drafter and a CAD technician, working on electrical one-line diagrams for the Navy. So really enjoyed that. We were known as the whiz kids. The engineers had been sent off to school to learn CAD at the time, and they refused to use it. They just said, no, we don't. We're engineers. We're going to do engineering work. And so we picked up the ball and started producing designs and drawings and all that stuff. Some of us peeled off and started building networks. You got to remember, this is before there was, you know, major networks. You know, the only centralized network system that was in existence was the VAX systems, you know, big mainframe systems. And so, you know, we all kind of started to specialize in different things. You know, the way we moved files back then was, you know, on a floppy disk. You know, and was very limited in what you could do with that.
No 50, no 1 terabyte floppy disks, or
no 1 terabyte floppy disk whatsoever. You know, that was years out. So yeah. But, you know, one thing is kind of held through these 30 years, and that's Moore's Law, right? And I got to experience it firsthand. You know, we were working on 286s, and then we had the 386 come out, and then the 486, and the progression of CAD, and then really started to see 3D CAD come out, you know, with AutoCAD, and it was absolutely painful to use. just really just, enjoyed that journey. Now I went from working in the shipyards to working on accounts with FAA and other government agencies, and was able to start to build components and library parts and start to understand the bigger picture of how this data can be used. Kind of fast forward a little bit, I got back into facilities on the Navy side. And that's where my passion really started to grow, with facilities and buildings and the built environment, and just the sheer amount of data that was locked away in drawings, right? And how we would collate all that and bring it all together and figure it all out and make it all make sense, right? And it was like, boy, someday, there's going to be a system out there that's going to capture this all, right? So, fast forward 30 years, here it is. I'm so excited about the times that we're in now, and just, the opportunities it gives us to really change the world. I spent quite a bit of time there on the government contracting side, and then I moved over to a developer side. So I got to see how developers build buildings out. We had opportunities to build buildings in, 18 months from start to finish. Got to learn that side of how leasing agreements are done, space planning, space management, permitting, how you get a project built in a certain amount of time. That was just a fantastic opportunity. Got to see that side of the world. And then I had a chance to moved back over to the government side for a little while to support, our troops and our missions. And I got to go back into facilities for a while, working on some pretty interesting projects, and really learn some of the value of what good data is for a facility, and how we can start to bring that together. Now, at that point, BIM was now starting to become a word that was, being thrown around. And Revit in particular was starting to become, bigger. Interestingly enough, I think that some agencies still struggle with that. And it's a struggle that we deal with in the whole entirety of, the AEC and O, right? Is that participation in BIM. But, reality capture, I think, is starting to really kind of close that gap, right? So we can use that system to capture that data very quickly, use it to baseline out, use it against our BIM models, and develop them. I mean, I'm blown away at some of the things that are happening in the industry now. It was really just a pipe dream. But throughout the whole entire process of this, you've seen Moore's Law continue to march forward, right? It's that doubling of compute, half the cost every 2 years, and it just continues. You fast forward and look at what's happening with NVIDIA and the GPU chips that are out there now, and AI, and it almost seems like it's really just off the charts. I had a chance to work for a general contractor. I've had a chance to work for an architectural firm, design team, work for an engineering company. And so, I think I've gotten to see just about every angle of how BIM could be used and every permutation that can be made out of it. And it's very interesting, all the different use cases out there. One of the things that I'm really excited about is just really reality capture growing into what it is today. The first time I got to work with a laser scan, a point cloud, was on a terabyte drive. The architect literally said, "Hey, you want to copy this? Sure, send me the hard drive." And that's still pretty much how we're doing things. We're still sending hard drive. When I was scanning, we would go out and we would make sure it's on a hard drive, and then we'd send it to the subcontractors to make sure they had it. Now we've got things like Syn2 and Preview 3D and the other systems out there that Faro have, and those are really giving access to the cloud for that storage, but it's still locked away from the owners in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm working as a consultant, representing just owners, we're able to start to kind of reveal those things to them. And one of the things that we really like about that is that now you can start to use this data as a time capsule, right? We can go back in time if it's properly collated and collected and put in control. We have that ability to now go back as a time capsule and look through time. So we can start to peel back the walls. I mean, it's just magical.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's been an incredible journey. 30 years have gone by very fast, and I'm so excited about this time in history with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And, the possibilities of building out the metaverse. I know that that's sort of a cliche.
Hey, I'm on board.
Yeah. But, it really is happening.
Yeah.
And one of the perspectives I have is that it doesn't seem like there's a lot of change happening while you're in the moment. It's only until you turn around and look back down those stairs that you've been climbing that you see how much change has occurred.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely feels like, just even in the last several years, the awareness and the adoption of any of this technology, from scanners to drones to how to use point clouds to, BIM adoption, like all of that has been growing so much over the last several years. We're now at the point that it's kind of that next level of like, how do we make the data more useful? How do we share the data with more people? How do we, take the data and link it and create ongoing living models as opposed to like one-time project models? And it's really an interesting time to see that scale and that adoption and that growth. And I was actually just on a conversation recently where there was a stat that was put out that like 90% of our data globally was created in the last 2 years.
Wow.
Because you look at the scale and the adoption of technologies and AI and machine learning and just all of it, there's so much growth happening with technology and in information. And that's what makes me excited about having these conversations and building a community around this. Is if that's what we've done in the last several years, what do the next several years look like? I feel like we're just hitting the normal in some of the tools, yet we're at the beginning stages in the others. Digital twins and metaverse and are terms that are getting thrown around, and but most industries don't have digital twin programs yet. They aren't implemented. It's not fully up and running. We're at the stage that most industries have companies that are tipping their toes in and piloting and figuring out what is that next step, or they have these ideas of what we could do with full digital twins of their assets, but how do we get there? And it feels like that's where we are now. And you see teams working together to figure out how we build this vision, from controlling things and what methods we collect data with and how we convert to models or meshes or visual. It really is an exciting time in the technology.
You're absolutely right, Matthew. One of the things that we're seeing with a lot of owners is they're really trying to figure out what that roadmap is going to look like. How do you build that out? And the first thing that we always say is start out with the end in mind. Where do you want to be at with it? It's a journey. It's not a turn a system on.
Yeah.
Being a consultant that is, software agnostic, we look at how we integrate those systems in across the stack. We're not trying to sell a particular piece of software. We're looking at how we integrate it into their overall roadmap. So, where does that start? Understanding those gaps that exist in the current system, starting to put standards in place, just starting to say, hey, these are the things that we need to do, educating the teams that are going to be working with this data. so that they're all aligned. It's really an alignment, problem, and if we can align everybody through education and training and whatnot, then we can start to build what we call that digital thread, right?
Yeah.
From design all the way through construction and into operations. And that's ultimately where you want to be at. You want that data to be able to flow very easily from one silo to the next. To really get rid of the silos by a larger sense. But
yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be. There are a lot of companies that internally are trying to figure out how to build digital twins. There's service providers that are out capturing. So I'd love for you to go a little deeper into what your actual focus, your guys' company, what it is that you're doing, how you're approaching, if you're consulting on helping people build digital twin programs, like, are you looking at certain industry types to begin with? Where are you seeing certain adoptions of this idea versus maybe others that you're seeing more hesitation or slow growth? Or, I would love to hear some more about that.
Yeah. So, where we're seeing a lot of growth right now are owners that have large campuses that they've got to figure out and understand what they have. That can be hundreds of buildings. And imagine trying to get your arms around all of that. And we also have clients that, frankly, are much smaller, but they know they've got to put a digital, they've got to have a digital roadmap in place. They're smart enough to know that has to happen. And the only way to do that is to do it right. I mean, we've all been down the road where we've implemented a piece of software the wrong way and it didn't work the right way. The best of the breed out there, work as hard as they can to make it all work right, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. And so there's a lot of risk in switching systems and moving over to something else. So getting that implementation right and making sure that the data is transferable across systems is critical. We see a lot of just developing gaps analysis and understanding where they're at with their journey. Where do they want to be at? Some owners want to see, full IoT digitization and being able to have that immediate feedback. Some are looking for, dashboards that return on their, key performance indicators, right? Some others are looking at sustainability or computational fluid dynamics, systems analysis and whatnot. So it's a wide range of needs. But the great thing is that there's a lot of tools out there now that are able to talk to each other if it's integrated the right way. So really excited about that. And again, this is such an interesting time because even the industry leaders are starting to recognize there's a need to have that interoperability between systems, sharing that data and being able to push it from one system to the other. We look at it from an owner standpoint. We want to make sure that data goes back to the owner. They're paying for it. They should have access to it. Just like you get a set of drawings back in the day, we'd get a set of drawings and a CD. We want to make sure that all that data is there. Yeah,
no, that's great. I feel like that is, a pretty important area when it comes to all these technologies. We talk about, all those different silos, and there's not enough consulting and educating around, what that process has to look like. When there's a company who decides, hey, we saw this technology, we want laser scanning implemented, or we want to build a digital twin, usually you're sold on something that you first saw and you don't know the full extent of what that workflow is going to look like. And, there are these silos of, hey, that data doesn't go into that platform, or this platform doesn't speak to that hardware. And, yes, they called this a digital twin, but it can't link to any data. And it still feels like, and I know this term gets used a lot, but it still feels like the Wild West in that there's just kind of stuff flying in every direction. And now we're like, okay, we need to start communicating together to build this ecosystem, to get an understanding of how these things work together and, break down some of those walls of those silos.
Yeah. The best analogy I can give you is, when I first learned how to go out and laser scan, best intentions of the person who taught me, I listened to about half of it and I was like, oh, okay, I got this figured out. I'll go out and do it myself. Now, good thing I did that on a Friday because I had to come back Saturday and fix everything that I did wrong. And I think that you kind of go through that process where you have to learn how to do it the correct way. I didn't use controls. I didn't use any spears. I just went out there and had fun. And I was like, oh, I'll stitch it together when I get back to the office. We've all been there. I learned the hard way. And so you pick up those things very quickly. It's the same process for building digital twins. There's ways to build them correctly. You want to really start with making sure that the data is captured correctly. It's formatted correctly so that it connects together. Over and over again. If you don't do those fundamental things. And sometimes it seems kind of like, yeah, I got it. I understand that. I don't need to do, and we deal with that all the time. And it's just, you have to start over sometimes.
Yeah. I think everybody in the industry has dealt with it. And for the most part, one of the reasons we're trying to put a focus toward building educational content or training material or courses is that historically, there's not really been a lot of places to go for that. When you look at all these technologies we talk about, it's always been, you just have to get the piece and bang your own head against the wall and learn the same hard lesson that everyone else is learning, because nobody's really teaching and educating and helping with that process. Everyone's just doing the same headaches. And I still see it happening today. Headaches that many of us went through 10 years ago. People are just now buying their first scanner and it was the wrong one and they didn't know about processes and I'm like, I believe that we can help the industry grow better together by starting to, take some of this information that those of us that have already gone through these headaches the last 10 years, start building some content and some educational material to help overcome some of those. And I feel like it helps the industry in whole, because we've all heard the client who said, hey, I tried that one time and it didn't work. Someone scanned and the data was bad, or I had someone model from my scan data and it was off. And I think usually it's not that the technology is not capable, it's that it was not used properly, or the workflows or the deliverables. There was something else that happened in the process. And yet, if we don't do things properly or we don't work together to create good solutions, then it puts the bad taste in a client or the industry's mouth by saying, here was something that didn't work, and we didn't work our way backwards and figure out why. In the client's mind, it just didn't work. They don't know when or why or how. And so I think those of us that are deeper in the technology, it betters the industry in whole if we can work together to build out better solutions, better workflows. And it goes back to that conversation around standards or certifications, or like, how do we start to qualify or quantify, when we look at certain project types that maybe take a really high level of expertise or a really deeper understanding of technical workflows? How do we know who has what level of experience, or, what devices are being used? Or again, it feels kind of like that Wild West of, if you ask 4 different companies for quotes to capture or build a digital twin or build a model, you're going to get 4 very different quotes that have very, very different results, that are using different processes. That I think that's where that next level of some types of standardizations and some processes that can be agreed upon and used across the industry seem to be that next step.
Yeah, one of the things that we started to do within the Digital Twin Consortium was to raise light that there was reality capture, that it does exist, and that there's a fit for that into that digital twin ecosystem, so to speak. We did a white paper on that, very high level, to basically understand the different devices that are out there, some of the parameters, and then start to apply those back into projects at a very high level, because reality capture for mining is completely different than tenant improvement, right? Horizontal versus vertical. All those things are completely different, and there are wildly different tools out there to fix those, to remedy those issues, right? Ground penetrating radar. Well, that's reality capture.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily see it, but it's there. We've got, the things that are happening with drones are just absolutely so exciting. And then all the way down into, pocket LiDAR, the phones that can go out and scan now. I was talking to someone just the other day, and I showed him just an example of a couple of the systems that are apps that are out there now. And he was like, oh, I need to send this to my dad. He's in construction. He would love to be able to use this for estimating, just to do quick takeoffs.
Totally.
So it all depends on the need that you have for, the device. And if you don't have I'm just going to say, you need to have a reality capture plan.
Yeah.
Just like you do a BIM execution plan, you have a reality capture execution plan. You put that in place and say, these are the stated goals and objectives of these captures, the frequency that we're going to capture. These are the devices. This is the fidelity that we want to see, that level of information, so that it can be properly used. Otherwise, it just doesn't fit together. And I'm also heartened by a lot of the technology now that's starting to come out, that's starting to stitch things together in ways that we didn't think possible before, and making it a little bit, I don't want to say foolproof, but a little less forgiving.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Higher chance of success. Let's face it. I mean, if we base the world of the metaverse, developed out, it's gonna require a whole heck of a lot more folks like us that are in reality capture to be able to build that data set, right?
Yeah.
We've got to get faster at it. We've got to make it easier. We've also got to be able to process all that data. It's a huge amount of data. And again, I'm very excited. I'm in the data center side of things. I have a lot of fairly decent history in data centers, and so I'm really excited about how data centers are continuing to evolve, and that side of that cloud compute that's out there that can really leverage some of these huge problems that we've had in the past with being able to process all that data. You think of how we're meshing models now in ways that, I remember when, some of the first systems came out, Recap, for instance, to mesh a model, you had to use a certain number of tokens to make that all work and everything else. And it was really interesting, but at the same time, we didn't know quite what to do with it all.
Yeah.
And now fast forward, you see some of the things that, other service providers now are doing that are just absolutely brilliant. And we're just at the beginning of it, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're really at the beginning of mass adoption. I feel like the last 10 years has been figuring it out, developing processes, but we're getting to the point that the devices are faster, they're cheaper, the data's better, softwares can handle the data easier. There are definitely still challenges in, processes to capture and keep data accurate. And, when you get into big jobs, the data is still huge and it takes a long time to process. And, then like you talked about, what's the process to get the data to somebody? It's, shipping a hard drive still sometimes, because it's so big, you don't want to wait and upload. And, so I think we have a lot of challenges to keep working on and keep figuring out. Yet it is to the point that it is doable to implement on a large scale. I'm curious, with the different areas that you're working in and you're talking in, what are some of the areas that you think are still some of the struggles or some of the challenges that maybe are, when it comes to digital twin plans and clients adopting, that's kind of the area you work in. what are some of the hesitations or the fears or the, the reasons you think that sometimes it still isn't being adopted faster?
It's a great question. And I think that one of the key things that we see a lot of the time is the connectivity, being able to rapidly go out and scan, get that data processed and back out to make it actionable intelligence off of. If you go out and scan, it takes you 2 days to process it, a rebar scan, for instance, before you're doing a pre-pour, then you've missed the boat, because by the time they're ready, they're pouring the next day.
Yeah.
And it's done. That's great. You documented it at that point. So I think speed to return to make those, make actionable intelligence available as fast as possible so you can correct those things before a pour are huge. The other piece of it is just accessibility to all the stakeholders. Even if you get it pushed onto the cloud somewhere, did the right people have access to it at the right time? I think that's really huge. The other piece of it really comes down to standards. What is it that you want? You can say that I want a level of information that is so high that, and it's sub-millimeter, tolerances, but is that really the detail that you need to, make a decision on?
Yeah.
In some cases, we see point cloud comparison tools out there like Avere and Doxel that are able to tell you the differences, but you don't necessarily, to understand what's going on there, that deviation analysis to occur, you don't necessarily have to have sub-millimeter accuracy. We just want to know, are you putting the pipe basically in the right place? That doesn't require sub-millimeter accuracy. Not yet.
Yeah.
And so finding that right balance of accuracy to speed is critical, right? The longer you time spend, on the site scanning so much detail that you can't process it, or it takes forever to process, then you've missed out on that opportunity. So, those are the things that we see owners struggle with, is understanding those things. And so part of our process is really enlightening and educating and training folks to be able to look for those types of things, find that right balance.
Yeah, no, I think that is those are great points. Those are challenges, and I think that's one of the benefits that we also get to see out of new development of different hardware. We look at a terrestrial scanner versus a backpack scanner or a handheld scanner or an iPhone scanner, and sometimes people look at a new piece of technology and they say, "Oh, hey, I can just use that now. I don't need the other one. I can just use a mobile scanner. I don't need terrestrial anymore because it's faster. I want the mobile. Oh, I can use the iPhone scanner now because it's cheaper. I don't need the other one." And that's where I think we still have this need for more education and more matrices built out to say, like, okay, what are the use cases you're going to try to hit with this data? And what do the accuracies need to be for those different types of use cases? Like you said, if you need a quick overlay for construction verification, does it need to be a millimeter? No, you'll know there's a tolerance of an inch or whatever of, is that pipe in the right spot? But are you going to take that same point cloud data that you're doing the verification for and then move over here and go measure and fabricate, a piece of steel that you want to install? Okay, well, maybe we want better than 2 inches there, and most people who are implementing scanning on any level of project, I think that's maybe a challenge as well, is tracking, like, what was it captured for and how accurate was it captured to be? And now what are the different teams that are wanting to take that data and use it for? Sometimes it's, an architect who asked for the scan, and so it was done to a certain level of accuracy, but now you're starting to see more of the team want to use the data, and somebody else wants to take it into Tekla and one in Revit and one in CAD. And, you're like, okay, we got to make sure we track and communicate well of how is this data captured? What should it be used for? as we see the different use cases of the data expand, if you want to run an accurate floor flatness, right, on data, that might need to be captured differently than if you're doing the verification of horizontal elements, because now the levelness matters more. And so there's, certain hardware can level itself or not, man, that's where I just keep going back to, like, the more complex that we get with what can be done with data, the more important it becomes on the education piece and how we help, make sure that things are done properly in order for those different use cases.
Yeah, I can't stress enough, having a reality capture execution plan in place is huge, because now you quantified what it is that you want, you've set expectations, but more importantly, now you can communicate that to other teams so that they can pick that data up and have that execution plan and understand how it was developed, why it was developed, and at what accuracy it was developed for. May not necessarily be your use case. You're absolutely right. With tenant improvement, floor flatness is huge, right? There's a lot of cost to leveling a floor out. And systems that go in place, they have very tight tolerances, especially in today's environment where, they want to leave the floors exposed. They want to see all that stuff, and the tolerances are just so tight,
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to screw it up, not a lot of time to get it right. So, those critical systems.
And with the expansion or the attention now on, like, prefabricated module building and stuff, when people are wanting to increase in that type of build, well, now you have to make sure that where it's going to fit in, because it's, they want it to get set in place and install, and, so you have to know, tighter than if everything was just kind of best fit in field and they had more tolerance. But, even just how the project is going to be designed or installed may then change your accuracy needs.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we see is we spend a lot of time coordinating models, making sure they're absolutely spot on. Everything's been coordinated, everything's been clashed out, and then we go and install it, and because they're complex systems, someone put something in the wrong place. How do we catch that? We can use reality capture to do deviation analysis, right? So if that pipe gets put in six inches in the wrong place, or 6 feet, I've seen that, we can catch that. Now that means that whatever's going to be prefabricated shows up on site, and it's going to actually go in right, instead of, oh, we've got a bust and we've got to start over here. That reality capture for deviation analysis is huge. I mean, especially in a constrained environment where we don't have a lot of superintendents that visually have to go out there and look at this stuff and catch it. We have the ability to kind of flag those big items really quickly, and that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine sitting down at an owner's meeting with the architect, the engineer, and the GCs all in the same room, in the same trailer, looking at the same data and going, hey, what's going on here? This trade put something, arguably, they didn't mean to, it just happened, in the wrong place. We can catch those things and mitigate them before they become a major issue, right?
Yeah.
And then we're working to that BIM model, which means that, at the end of the day, that as-built is going to be a whole heck of a lot closer to what was designed. So, and we can start to use reality capture for that as-builting process, so that when we create those record models, they're pretty darn spot on.
Yeah.
Reality capture just fills in all that detail beyond level, LOD 350, 400. So we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
We get everything.
That's an area that I think that, again, when we look at the speed improving of scanning, the cost improving, it starts allowing us to do more volumes of work. And I think that's one of those areas that I've seen, we've talked about for a while in the industry, but I feel like I'm just starting to see some companies adopt. Is historically, you would just go out and scan, an existing building or facility because a renovation was going on or because an expansion was going to happen. You'd scan it in the beginning and use that data and throw it away, and they would go build, and that was it. And now we're starting to see that idea of, okay, it's faster and it's cheaper, and now we can maybe afford to scan in the beginning and then scan during construction to, like you're saying, compare to the model and make sure that it's being built where it's supposed to, and then scan at the very end to close out with an actual true final as-built, instead of what has always been done is some drawing is marked up that says, yeah, it looks like it was built good, and where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely, Matthew. And what happens is it also is in 3D. It's not in 2D anymore. Yeah. I mean, I had a colleague of mine tell me once, he says, we spend an awful lot of time dreaming things in 3D so that we can put them in 2D, so then we can then go back out in reality and build them in 3D so that we can then transpose all that stuff that's been built in 3D back into 2D so we can hand it over to the poor guy who has to work with it in 3D. Yeah. Right. Our facility managers and our operators they work in 3D. If they've got to get up there on a ladder, how are they going to get to that valve? How are they going to exercise those things? How are they going to make sure that they're changing the filters out the most cost-effective way and the safest way? It's an incredible tool, and now the cost has come down to the point where it's affordable, and we can really start to rethink that. And we should be rethinking that. We need to challenge the industry to rethink how we're doing things, how we're turning data over at the end of a project. Yeah. 2D is just 2D is interesting, but I think its days are,
how long? How long you think we have until
longer?
Yeah, until submissions are models or reality capture data as opposed to everything being produced back out into drawing sets. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to be worked out from a legal standpoint. We do a lot of projects that are international, and so contracts are a little bit different in other countries, and they're very much pushing that envelope in ways. 3D, 3D deliverables, model deliverables that really make a lot more sense for the owner at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious, and I know we've probably already hit on it a little bit, but when you're talking to somebody new, you're talking to a company that doesn't really have an idea about digital twins or why they would, but maybe they are an asset owner and they have, tons of buildings. And, how do you go about starting some of those conversations, when we're starting to explain why it's something that you guys are implementing or why other companies are adopting it? How do you go into a conversation like that in explaining to someone who's really not on that vision yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really depends on the client. Sometimes some of them have seen, a great demo, showing a digital twin, and that's what they want, right? And then we've got others that are just really kind of starting the journey and don't understand. They heard the word digital twin. They don't even really understand the difference between BIM, reality capture, or digital twin. And where do they start with that journey? And really our job, and one that I think is a great question is, where do you want to be at? How do you want to manage your buildings? How do you want to manage your campus? Are you going to use that data for operations? Are you going to use it for construction? Or, what are your goals and objectives of the data? We know that the old way of doing business is just not going to suffice anymore. It's got to change because we just don't have the money, and we shouldn't be spending all the money putting designs together that we then basically throw in a box and our archive. I've worked with clients that frankly did everything in Revit. And at the end of the day, they got a printout on a hard copy printout because that's what they asked for. That was it. All that money that was invested in that, they paid for that design to be done in Revit, cutting edge, best architects in the world, turned it over in 2D drawings. You can't leverage that data anymore. Now you've got to pay someone to scan that, convert it, and build that model again. And for owners, that's a huge, investment to throw away. I mean, you wouldn't throw away the physical building in the same manner, right? You're paying for a physical building to be built virtually. You should leverage that data.
Yeah.
So, the conversations are very different, but it is all about breaking down silos and starting to align that data the right way so that it can be, leveraged.
Yeah.
So that overall cost for creation of that content is reduced, because now I can use that BIM data for pushing out into my robotics program that can help me, drill holes in the ceiling for anchors, right? Or print the walls, out on the floor, or the systems that need to be installed overhead. We're now using that data that's been meticulously gone through, coordinated, and everything else, and we can use it for other purposes, right? And the heartening thing about that is that helps with our resource challenges. Imagine a worker's out there drilling holes in a ceiling, 70 a day, say, and you've got a robot that can do 700 a day. And I can take that operator and have him operating the robot. He goes home without a bunch of dust on him. He wasn't on a ladder putting himself in harm's way. He hasn't hurt himself straining his arms and his neck up there drilling holes, right? And we're getting a higher return on our work, right? The throughput's getting done faster. So, I mean, it's just a win-win. And if you think of the technology on robotics as being just the beginning of this, imagine in 2 or 3 years when it's even faster and it's more capable. That whole Moore's law comes back in, right?
Yeah.
So now we've got multiple, printers or drill, systems that can do multiple places. It's incredible to me.
Yeah.
It really kind of starts to solve some of our problems, but we've got to look at that data at the beginning and really format it the right way. We've got to emphasize control, understanding survey points, and establishing those things, having a campus-wide coordinate system that allows people to go back in over time and add layers of data to that on that coordinate system is critical.
Yeah.
And so I know I'm kind of meandering there a little bit, but yeah, there's just a lot of stuff there that really can be leveraged off of what we're doing if we think bigger, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing, in the industry is really a lot of possibility for augmented reality and virtual reality to really play a bigger role in how we're doing coordination effort, but also bringing additional stakeholders to the table that have not traditionally been represented at the design table. The facilities team, for instance, being able to use VR and then being able to leverage, reality capture within that environment, that immersive space now to start to look at things that are happening in their own facilities. Could you imagine? So, one of the things that I really am interested in seeing right now is what Preview 3D is doing around potentially for operations, right? Being able to run some scenarios where we can take reality capture and actually cut pieces out of it and move them around or create other objects out of it. That's just, it's just so cool.
Yeah.
But let's extrapolate that a little bit further and say, what if we use it for safety? So now I can start to run teams through the building and understand safety aspects, look for issues. Or even I've got to, we always used to have, when I was in facilities, we always had these issues where there was one or two guys, folks on that facilities team, and they never could go on vacation because if they were gone and something happened, and it always did when they would go on vacation, we have the ability now to remote folks in, or even remote them in to walk through the space with someone else that may not necessarily know, and show them, what area to take a look at, or what valve to turn off, or whatnot. So, I think that there's just some incredible opportunities to bring those people that have never participated in BIM or reality capture into the fold and really participate in a way that I think really brings everything full circle. That digital building life cycle. We've talked about it, but those end users have traditionally not been part of that.
Yeah, I feel like that AR, VR side is, scanning, been around for a long time. It's becoming adopted. Drones are starting to become more commonplace. Almost every construction site, some level of drone interaction. I feel like we're just at that starting point for AR, VR, where up till now, it's even kind of like along with the robotics side too. AR, VR, robotics, I feel like are just now touching the surface in the reality capture space, in the built environment, that very few firms have actually implemented and use it on a normal basis. But we are starting to see that. Again, we look back at why the other ones are working. It's becoming better. The technology is becoming easier to use. Less cables and connected to high power computers. And, you can actually just take a headset and a laptop out now and actually connect to a space. And I think there's a huge amount of potential around the immersive spaces, and the AR overlays for, like you talked about, the construction aspect. You think about someone who's going out to build and being able to throw down AR goggles and look at plans or look at where something is supposed to go, instead of just going back to our, like we've said, 2D documents. They're peeling through 50 pages to find, the diagram. It's like, no, we just turn the layer on and look at it, and we see where things are supposed to be built. I think from both the actual building aspect and then training, I think is still just such a big one when we look at immersive for like VR. That one I've seen a big need for around complex facilities and hazardous environments, where a lot of times people are trained on these made up scenarios, where now you could actually train users on your real facility, and they'll know exactly where in your building the shutoff valve is and the emergency eye wash station, and they'll train on the actual site data instead of a made up scenario.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Matthew. The first time I went out to a construction site with a HoloLens, it was a HoloLens 1, and we had hobbled this system together. It wasn't really fully baked and very much bleeding edge, but it worked well enough to go out and do some tests with it. We're on a construction site. We're 30 feet, maybe 40 feet in a construction pit. They're building the basement, basically, right, where the parking garage will eventually be. And we've got the headset on, and it's probably 30 degrees out. It's cold. Middle of winter here in Washington, D.C. And we're moving around in this thing, and it's a little clunky, and it's moving a little bit and everything else. But, some of the workers start to come over, and they're like, what do you have on here? What is that? And these are guys that are putting forms together for the foundations, right? The concrete guys. And I said, well, here, pull it off, and I put it on their head. And I said, here, try it out. And they put that thing on, and it it's just like, you know, the first time you take a kid to a candy store, he had this grin from ear to ear. He immediately understood what he was working on. And that to me is one of the most valuable use cases for it, because our buildings are so much more complex than they ever have been in time. And we demand everything be built exactly right the first time. And here we have this tool, even if it's not perfect, it's not perfectly aligned and it moves a little bit and this and that. That's okay. Because now what we've done is we've basically bridged that gap between 2D and 3D and gave them the ability to visualize that. He immediately understood why there was a relief in one of the foundation footings. Oh, it was for a drain line to run through, and it needed that proper grading for it to drain properly. So we're down there, we're talking with them, and then the crane operator, who's 100 feet up above all this, actually comes down and he says, well, what are you guys doing down there? I said, well, here, try it on. He puts it on and he's like going, oh, this is amazing. This is absolutely, same grin across his face.
Yeah.
This is absolutely incredible. I could use this up there because now I could understand where my picks need to be dropped. So the value that AR and VR can bring to a team, and these are people that do not participate in our environment at all, right?
Yeah.
They might get a set of drawings. If we can start to bridge those gaps, we can reduce the time it takes to get familiar with a site. That means that we're going to reduce risk, because they're going to understand where the layout is supposed to be at. They're going to understand, what the sequence is for something to be put together, and they understand the complexity of it. They can start to ask maybe some of those harder questions, like, we're putting in this really, intricate ceiling. How are we going to access the equipment above it? And we can start to head off those change orders really early on. So I think that we've only started to scratch the surface with what AR and VR can do, and certainly with robotics. I mean, if you think about it, if that robot finds an issue drilling a hole, it can mark it off in the system. It can be fed back into the BIM model to say, hey, we didn't place that anchor here. We moved it and put it here. The operator decided to move it there. Now we've created that as-built. Now we have something so much more accurate than we ever would have. And it's being captured organically. It's happening as it occurs, rather than waiting until the last minute to go in and, 99% done with the project. And now we've got to create these, record drawings or record models from as-builts, Yeah. It's such a game changer. And I just don't think that maybe everyone fully realizes just how much of a game changer it can be for the industry.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's so early. Most people don't have that vision yet of where some of those technologies are going to go. And that's why I think we have roles we have, right? Like, it's hard because a lot of companies maybe don't have full innovation divisions that focus on all these tools and trying to develop them. So everyone's doing their job that they know how to do now with the tools that they know. And so until industry personnel that are focused on the technology and the bleeding edge and creating these solutions, until we work out those scenarios of the headaches and how do we put these technologies together to actually go to a client and say, here's how you can implement it and we'll help you here, and this is what you need. It takes so much work for an organization to go try to do it on their own that some of them just don't want to do it yet. They want to wait until someone brings that full solution to them so that they can plug and play, and they've seen it proven, they know it works, and they're just ready to go. And that's where I think there's opportunity created for, the industry personnel that are in this technology that see that. we can work together to develop those processes and those solutions and those packages and collaboration opportunities to be able to put those full services together and build out what that future looks like for people.
Yeah. I mean, owners, from the owner's perspective, they have core job to, whether it's building rockets or building cars or taking care of buildings or writing software or running buildings, whatever it is that they do, their core competency is not BIM. It's not necessarily reality capture. And so that's where we help them out, is that we can be that trusted advisor for them for that journey so that it's implemented the right way. Because frankly, it's even from our side of it, it's changing so rapidly. It's, it can be challenging to keep up with. And that's why we work so closely with industry partners to understand, what things are on the horizon, what new things are you going to be releasing, and how are those going to integrate, and are they interchangeable with, other systems? Can we reuse that data for other things? How do we get that documentation turned over at the end of our project? Making sure that the owner that paid for it is getting it, and can use it. Because let's face it, in some situations, this scenario can be worse than it was when we just got a big pile of drawings. Now we've got a system that we've got to log into, and if we can't find that data, or hey, the owner who received that data won the lottery and moves on, how do we get access to that data? What are the data retention policies associated to that data if we don't own it? Those are things that still need to be worked out, and we're still working through that as an industry. But trying to better understand that and make sure that those deliverables are provided the right way. It's critical, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's great to see organizations like you guys are putting that focus on trying to, fill a gap, right? I think that many of us see these gaps over the years, and now we start to identify how can we solve some of these missing pieces. You guys focusing on the owners and helping, them figure out how to implement these plans. And, we're shifting our focus to helping the users learn what tools and what processes, and, and then together as a community, now we have all the puzzle pieces in order to make, the whole ecosystem plug and play, bringing together that whole community of the personnel who know how to capture well and process well and implement well and work with the owners to get to where our vision is. We talked about it a minute ago, digital twins everywhere and immersive environments, and it's going to be a challenge to get there. We know that it's possible. We know the technology is on its way there. We know the ROI and the benefits of where we see it going. And now we in the industry are responsible for figuring out how we build that. I love, I was talking to a group of leaders a few weeks ago, and we were talking about innovation and the need for innovation. And, we always quote these, iconic people who talk about the future and the vision. And even we sit here and talk about, man, in the future, I could imagine that every building has a digital twin and robotic cars are driving around. And then I stopped and I said, the only way we get there is if people build it. We shouldn't just imagine this future and then sit back and hope somebody builds it. Like, we are in this time that it is we who are building to that future, working with the technologies that are available, making suggestions back to the people that are manufacturing the technology based on the feedback we get in the industry from owners, from projects. Like, we are a part of building that future. And so it's part of it's up to us, to work on together.
Yeah, it's like the analogy I gave you earlier. It's just like when I started my career, I didn't have the forethought to think that tomorrow I'm going to look back on all this stuff as being like, wow, we've traveled a long ways. You know, the whole, the journey up the stairs, you know, you don't realize that you're climbing and progressing until you turn around and look back and go, boy, we've gone a long ways. And we're very much at that point where those steps that we're continuing to take are really pushing us to that next plateau, right? And how we're going to use this technology. I mean, if we talk about the metaverse, right, and how that's going to play out, you know, it's going to require a whole lot of us collecting a whole lot more data. And what data do we want to collect? And we've got to make it faster. We've got to make it more integrated, and we've got to make it seamless. And yes, I imagine there will be multiple metaverses out there, right? It's just like the internet. We have a private internet within, you know, our corporate environment. And then we also have, you know, the regular public internet. And, you know, I don't see that it's really going to be that much of a difference, other than it's going to be fully immersive in a way that I think we have a hard time even imagining what those possibilities are right now. And that's what I'm really excited about. We're building those building blocks, those foundations. Yeah.
No, I agree. I love the conversations around what, you know, what is metaverse? What is the metaverse? What are metaverses? And, you know, I don't think there's a lot of people in our industry that are thinking that far ahead with metaverse. Most people hear it and they're like, oh yeah, you know, social media companies creating gaming environments. And, you know, yet those of us in this industry, I'm like, we are part of what, again, could build the metaverse to be an immersive experience. And it'll be there. Yes, there may be big players like there are on social that have these big virtual environments that you can log into, that you can meet, that you can do entertainment stuff. But we can take the same technology and apply it to owners and to, you know, asset owners that, you know, you think about an organization that has 1,000 buildings. Can you imagine an immersive environment that they can log into, and it's a virtual world of theirs, and they can visit their buildings, and they can interact and have meetings, and they can walk up and you know, check on data and deal with tagging and do simulation and training. And it is still so early that a lot of people look at that as kind of fluff, but I think the technology is moving that direction, that it is feasible, it is possible. And once something is possible, then it's just a matter of time until somebody figures out how and why to integrate them, and then it moves that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always remember the interview on the Today Show about what was the internet, and sometime in the early 90s, and it was like, what is it? You know, and you think about that question, what is the internet? And my definition back then of what the internet would be would be very similar to what it was at the time, which was, you know, it's just a bunch of people getting together and chatting online and sharing, you know, ideas. You know, who would imagine that you book flights on it, you know, buy cars on it, interact in ways that we've never interacted, you know, with people around the world, you know? So imagine that immersive environment and what that entails, and just all the crazy ideas that are going to come out of it, right? You know, I remember before the .com bust, you know, there was a lot of companies out there, you know, what was it? You know, there was so many different .coms out there, and some of them didn't make it, right?
Yep.
But those were the forerunners to Amazon and you know, all these other companies out there now that are just, you know, they're massive. They didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about what the future holds and how we're going to play a huge role in that, because reality captures, I fully believe, is a foundational piece of that environment. And so how we get there is going to be interesting. What it's going to look like is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think there'll be, there'll be applications, there'll be platforms that are not geospatially accurate, that are not interactive to the real world, that are just immersive, that are fun. But I see this whole other vision of an actual digitized real world that integrates with real physical and virtual, and you look at technologies like, what if, all of our glasses get to the point that AR is simply in a small pair of glasses? Well, now if you have geospatial mapped roads and airports, then someone can show you virtual displays based on your location if you have this mapped out, and you can have virtual overlays. But in order for some of those big ideas, you have to have geospatial information, and it has to be tracking where you're at, and and so that just continues to create more ideas and more opportunities. And yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm excited to see where things go. And a lot of people show, hesitation and fear, and, think we'll be, we've seen the movies where everyone's plugged in at home and they don't leave the house anymore. And, it is our job when we look at AI and we look at new technologies and we look at immersive, like, there's always pros and cons to it, and there's ethics, and there's things that we have to think about the negative too. But the thing I always try to lean back to and say is, somebody is going to implement this technology, and so why not be a part of trying to do it in a good way, in a good, healthy way, and implementing use cases that are beneficial to society. And because we can't stop other people from doing it, we might as well be a part of it and try to help shape what that future looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to have those conversations, and we need to have policy around some of those conversations. We've really got a hard look at it, and I think AI is really kind of a wake up call to a lot of the industry, that we need to do something about it, right? There have to be some guardrails in place for how we're going to use this data and what it's going to look like, and make sure that the rules of the road are equal for everyone, right? So that everyone can participate in this in a safe way, right?
Yeah.
I've got a kid that I worry about being online too much, and it is the way that things are going to go. But at the same time, what are those rules of engagement going to be?
Yeah.
AI is really incredible. I'm really excited about what that's going to do to our industry, and just what it's already starting to do. There's just so much exploration to do with that. And I'm also cautious about, do we have enough compute power to deal with all this? We're going to need a lot more data centers to make all this possible. I've heard predictions anywhere from 3 times the amount of compute power that we have now to 10 times the amount of compute power we have now. Imagine that. How are we going to get there?
It's always crazy again to look backward, because like we talked about earlier, how long was it ago that you were using floppy disks and they were, the maximum capacity was 100 megabytes, or I don't even know what the size was, but we have come so far to where we are today. It makes it, and we've learned so much. We've created new technologies. The possibilities have expanded. So to try to even imagine where we'll be in 10 years is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, when I started out, there were no network engineers. There just wasn't. There were no IT specialists that, there was a guy who loaded the software on, maybe, or you got to do it yourself. I mean, there's whole entire industries that have been created just around connecting computers together. Whole entire industries. I mean, it's just incredible, so I'm very bullish on the jobs. There are going to be new jobs, and they're going to change, and those roles are going to be different, and hopefully they're going to be better.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about it, but cautiously optimistic sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, as we should be. No, it's an exciting time to be in the industry. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your background, your interest, where you're at, what you're doing. We love talking with people and really just exploring what's happening out there And of course, always excited to talk with you and have you as a part of our network, someone out there driving and pushing ahead. So thanks for joining us for the conversation today, and look forward to sharing this out with the community.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Really appreciate it, Matthew.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yep. We'll see you again next time.
Bye now.